Can you repeat that definition back to me in your own words?
I'm already skipped over it and I don't really care. So past loss with like racism.
No. Hypothetical.
Right? So,
Literally make something up in your mind. Just a really loose implementation of it.
I'm not really that creative, bro.
Specifically
what?
because of their biology.
Okay. All right, guys. We got him. Chat.
Fanatiq. Just tell me how to pronounce her name. I don't want to miss. That's
Fanatiq.
How do I say your name?
Fanatiq.
Fanatiq. Okay.
What's up?
Yeah, I think it's fixed now. The perms were fucked for some reason.
Okay. All right.
This is a very beautiful song, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much, man.
Okay, let's try Goldy again. Without the rest of the very high IQ whites in here coming in to fuck things up.
Whites.
The whites, yeah. Okay, there's Goldy. Goldy, I'm going to invite you to speak again.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Unfortunately. I'm joking.
All right. I just want to. That was hilarious. What everybody just did. Congratulations.
Okay.
Good laugh out of that one. So yeah, let's go ahead and resume back to where we were at. So I don't think that it's fair for you to call yourself a conservative if you can't align yourself with the Republican Party right now. But to answer your question,
wait. Can we stop right there though? Can we just address that?
Do you not want me to answer your question?
Well, okay, sure. You can answer the question. I'll just make a cliff note.
Jeez, I feel bad for you. Just made me want to feel bad for answering your question.
No,
but basically, the reason that I'm a conservative is because it's important to preserve and protect our traditional values within the United States. Certain things do need to be changed. However, the majority of everything that's set in motion is good, and it's important to preserve tradition and conservatism and embrace what makes our country so great.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If maybe you see something that there's a tradition that you can, as with education and time and whatever, you come to see that tradition is harmful, can a person be still hold to maybe some of the broader conservative values while still recognizing the need to be progressive on certain specific issues which you think might be particularly harmful? Would that make sense?
Well, look, I don't want you to bore the poor listeners to death. So we can talk in robotic gibberish, or we can get down to the issues that actually matter.
What about what I said was robotic? Wait. What about what I said was robotic? You're not going to just ignore that question, are you? I just asked you a very direct question.
Okay. I'm sorry. I struck a nerve. Let me answer your question. You can't ask me that question when not being specific about what tradition you're talking about. So it's just a looping-ended philosophical professor type college question that nobody cares about. That's why I'm immediately attacking your question, because it doesn't matter. It's a useless question. So I'm going to start off the bat and ask you a more direct question that's not going to bore everybody to death.
No, we're not going to do that because I asked you a direct question. And so if I'm asking you a direct question,
and I gave you a direct answer.
Your direct answer was, I'm not going to answer your question. If that's the type of conversation you're interested in having, I don't know how we actually move forward in the conversation in which someone's asking you a very direct, pretty succinct question, and you're saying that you don't see the purpose of it. If you need me to rephrase the question such that you'd be able to answer it, I can do that. But simply saying, I'm not going to answer the question and I would like to move to an entirely different topic, seems like you're not really giving me a fair shake here from the very beginning of the conversation. Does that sound right?
All right. I'm going to go ahead and digress. I need you to take a deep breath. Let me answer your question.
Thanks.
You asked me, in a nutshell, do I think that if a tradition is harmful, basically, should it be changed? Sure. But I can't really give you a personal experience type of based question. Okay, repeat your question. Okay. If you can sum it up though a little bit better, that would be nice.
It was really short the first time. I'll try to do it just as succinctly as I did the first time. If there's a tradition that you've come to know is harmful, can you still be conservative while recognizing to progress past that harmful position?
Yes.
Okay, so then in that case, then a person can be progressive while still being conservative and having in a broader sense, conservative values, while recognizing some things, some traditions are harmful and wanting to progress past those things?
It depends on the situation, and it depends on the situation because obviously there are more conservative values than, more, I would say, revolutionized conservative values. It simply just depends on whatever you're talking about. It's not a direct, there's no direct interpretation of that.
Great. Sure. I guess maybe getting more specific would be good, but I needed to make sure that you understood the broader idea first before we drill down into specifics. Can you understand, like, that if your foundation is garbage, then the idea of like building like a really nice and decadent house on a terrible foundation, you're going to still result in disaster. So in this situation, I felt like I needed to make sure that we at least agreed on the broader perspective first, that you could even see that as a possibility before we start getting the specifics. So let's go about something. Let's talk about like historically. Maybe there might have been a tradition of segregation within the country, like in the 60s, right? So then a person in the 60s might still overall hold to some of the broader traditions of family and maybe limited government and, religion even, or whatever the various communities that this person is a part of. He might hold to the traditional values that are like pretty much associated with those things. However, a person can still recognize that the tradition of segregating against black people is probably harmful. The consistent discrimination is harmful. So while that person can be overall conservative in their general makeup and their general mentality, that person could still see a need to progress past something that they might see harmful, such as discrimination. So in that sort of case, would you consider that individual still conservative?
Let me follow you up with an actual a better question. My
I think
question
my
for you,
question's perfectly fine. I don't need you to ask.
hold on,
I don't
hold
need
on.
you to rephrase my
You're
question.
going back in history. So let me ask you this question: what did white people gain from desegregating?
No, I'm sorry. Before we can get into your specifics,
Listen,
can you
I've
answer
answered
my
your
question?
questions. I understand that you're the host and I've answered your questions, but I was under the interpretation that we were going to be focusing on modern issues. I'm not sitting here trying to do a walk down memory lane. I think history is important to address modern issues, but you're sitting here just giving off a typical bullshit spew. So I'm going to ask you a question since you want to, bring up the racism and because I thought this was on systemic racism. So let me ask
It
you
will
a
be.
direct
First
follow
off,
up
hold on.
question.
No. You can't do that. So, Goldie, here's where the problem
I
comes
just
in.
did though. What do you mean I can't do that? I
Well,
literally just did it.
it's not. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. It's not conducive to an actual conversation for you to keep moving this goalpost in this way. So first, I made a statement in which it was pretty broad, and I asked you a question. You then answered the question and said, "But it's too broad to really mean anything. You need to get specific." So then it's like, okay, good. We at least got the foundational thing of the idea that this is a potential possibility. So now at this next step, I'm going and getting more specific to make sure. Now let's apply. Hold on. Wait a minute. One second. One second. Go. Wait. 1 second. So then I got very
Okay, I'll let you
specific.
talk.
I got you. It's fine, and then you'll be able to talk too. When you asked me for something specific, so now what I did is I created a specific scenario in order to apply the broad principle that I originally asked. Right. So now that I'm doing that, like this is literally 2 steps into the conversation, and you're immediately bucking against it and wanting to just completely change the topic. The conversation is about systemic oppression. That is an example about systemic oppression. I'm choosing that specific thing because it happens to be egregious enough and agreed upon enough such that we should at least be able to extrapolate a principle. Then we will be able to use that principle and make it more modern and apply it to something today. But we're really at the foundational points of this argument, and it seems like you're unwilling to really engage there.
Fanatiq, just tell me how to pronounce your name. I don't want to miss. That's
Fanatiq.
How do I say your name?
Fanatiq.
Okay. You need to understand something right off the bat. I'm going to answer your questions, but your goal isn't to change my mind, and my goal is not to change your mind. Your goal is to appeal to the people who don't have an overall opinion on the said matter. So because you're talking, and I'm obviously this is a debate. I'm going to attack your execution so far. Talking in this crazy fast manner, people aren't following what you're saying because you're not exciting, you're not charismatic. So if you want to capture and change the opinion of somebody else, you need to completely change your execution because so far I want to just go to sleep, and I'm sure many other people do. So let's have an actual argument. Let's, nobody needs to talk in 5 to 10 paragraphs. I'll give you opportunities to speak and vice versa. You don't need to clog the mic, and you need to really take it a step back and let's talk about the modern issues that matter. We don't need a prologue, it's a debate.
Okay. So can you answer my question, please?
Repeat your question.
I feel like this is the second time I've had to repeat my question, and I think I'm pretty good with my words here. So I feel like you're not really listening, but we'll try again. If a person in the 60s was a conservative person and subscribed to traditional conservative values of their communities, of their religion, of their country, and so on and so forth, but at that same time, that person recognized that something like discrimination, specifically against African Americans and segregation, was harmful, could that person be progressive towards something as specific as segregation while overall still maintaining their conservative values and thus labeling themselves as a conservative?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then at that point, then I guess now making it modern in today's time, if a person still subscribes to traditional conservative values but recognizes maybe some of the things that are harmful nowadays, then that person would then be able to make themselves progressive. Let me be able to say that they are progressive while recognizing that some of the more traditional social values they subscribe to. With that, then that person, just like I guess it's an analogy to the person in the '60s, with that person today who says, I subscribe to traditional moral values, but I believe that we should be progressive on certain aspects which I think are harmful. Could that person still be like conservative overall while being progressive on specific topics?
Not in the context you're using, because you're trying to basically paint a picture that you're a conservative, yet separating yourself from the Republican Party and painting yourself as a progressive by using an example in history of segregation. That doesn't work. That's not a very good analogy for what you're trying to portray. So my answer to you is it doesn't apply to you. I already know what you're going with this. You're leading right up to it. It doesn't apply in the picture you're trying to paint yourself as to the audience.
Okay, well, tell me where the lack of application is because I'm missing it then.
So I'm going to need to. I can't give you that answer yet because you haven't really presented your overall argument. You haven't presented what issues you disagree with me on. You're giving me an introduction. I agree with you, and you're asking me the same questions. I already said I agree with you. I don't agree in the context you're using it as a setup to what you're trying to paint yourself as, but it just doesn't work because you're trying to use segregation and '60s racism in modern America today, and that it doesn't even come close to what was in the '60s.
Right, but it's really crazy to me. You just said that I didn't give an actual argument. I've only given an introduction, yet you've already concluded, despite the fact that you're saying I haven't expressed anything that you would be able to contend with, you still already have
You
concluded in some sort of way that what I'm doing is wrong and that I can't actually make the argument or that it doesn't
That's
apply to
correct.
me,
What you're
even
doing
though I
is
haven't
wrong, is
presented an
because you're
argument. How
setting
could you do
yourself
so
up to try
prejudicedly?
to paint yourself as is comparing segregation to to somebody that can be against segregation but be a conservative. That doesn't apply in America because we don't have segregation. We don't have '60s racism anymore. I know what you're doing. What I said is you haven't presented any actual arguments on a standpoint for what was presented in the announcements. We were supposed to be debating about critical race theory and systematic racism. You've done nothing of the sort. You've given a prologue. Honestly, I already know what you're setting yourself up to be as. But I think that we don't need that introduction because it doesn't matter. Let's talk about the issues that matter. I want to
Okay.
see where you disagree with me upon. I don't care about your introduction. I don't care about your history lesson. Too many people are fixated on the past instead of using the past to create a better future. You're not doing anything. You're just doing the typical relive the past, bullshit this, bullshit that. Let's talk about the issues that matter.
Okay. I guess it sounds like you're really conceding the point that you
Can I
can't.
get a
Whatever. So
hashtag
we can just
issues
move
that
on.
matter in chat?
Sure. So let's just
I
move
think the
forward.
people is who we should appeal to here.
I don't. What I appeal to is the
Oh, you
ideas.
don't. You
I
don't want
don't.
to appeal to the people. You don't care.
I appeal
You're
to
not
the
like I said.
I
I see. We
appeal
got them.
I appeal to the ideas being discussed. I think the most important thing is to make sure that my ideas are correct, that they are that they are accurate, they are consistent. I think that's what I typically want to do. It's not this, so for me, the purpose of this conversation is to suss out the ideas, make sure that they're whatever, and then move on. And the next person that I speak to, then I will be more prepared, more able to accurately, like I typically use these discussions as a whetstone, right? It's typically,
Tremendous. Tremendous.
yeah, so that's
So
my
do you
goal here.
support, let me ask you a question. Do you
Hmm.
support critical race theory?
Sure, yes.
Okay, explain what critical race theory is. I would like to hear your interpretation.
Sure. Critical race theory is a verb. It basically describes what I would say is it's the recognition that race intersects. Well, I'm going to read this actually because I already have it. CRT is the recognition that race intersects with other identities, including sexuality, gender identity, and others. CRT recognizes that racism is not a bygone relic of the past. Instead, it acknowledges that the legacy of slavery, segregation, and the imposition of second-class citizenship on Black Americans and other people of color continue to permeate the social fabric of this nation. And then it has a few tenets that they are race is not biologically real, but it is socially constructed and socially significant. It recognizes that science, as demonstrated in the Human Genome Project, refutes the idea of biological racial differences. According to scholars Richard Delgado and Jen Stefanchik, race is the product of social thought and is not connected to biological reality. The second one is the acknowledgement that racism is a normal feature of society and is embedded within systems and institutions like the legal systems that replicate racial inequality. This dismisses the idea that racist incidents are aberrations, but instead are manifestations of structural and systemic racism. Okay, we can stop at either one of those. You don't think that racism is a normal feature of society?
I mean, one of the things that you read off? I mean, do you not believe race isn't real? I mean, do you agree with that statement that race isn't real? I mean, what?
No. Define what you mean by real, because
well, race... no, I just within that 7-page essay you just read, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Chap, but one of the things that you read is race isn't real.
That's not the what it said was specifically race is not biologically real, meaning that there is and then it goes on to explain that the Human Genome Project refutes the idea of biological race differences. Do you believe there are biological race differences?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I remember
name one.
Doing a whole unit on my senior year of high school regarding the fact that African American people are more prone to heart disease. Yeah, there's a biological, depending on your race. I mean, what kind of bullshit are you talking about?
Okay, so let me make sure we're clear here. Are African Americans more prone to heart disease? Could it be because of environment and diet? Or would you say that it's specifically because of their biology?
Okay. All right, guys, we got him. Chat, I think we got him. What do you mean more prone to heart disease is in relation to your social status? Is that what you're trying to push right now?
I'm sorry, maybe you didn't hear me. I'll repeat myself. Listen this time. Do you think that probably the higher incidences of heart disease in African Americans could be related to their diet? Or would you say that it's probably just because of their race?
Biologically, and I know that people are going to grab the sources because I'm not sitting on a laptop here. Biologically, during the unit I studied, we came to the conclusion that on a biological standpoint, African American people are at a higher risk of heart disease. They're also at a higher risk of pregnancy issues, high risk pregnancies biologically. And that's one of the things that we learned. And that was by one of my most liberal teachers I've ever had in my life. If he's teaching that and all the facts pointed in my anatomy class, biologically they're at risk of those issues. It has nothing to do. Yeah, I mean, race has biological issues. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so here's the problem. Again, what you're doing is you're confusing correlation with causality, right? Like, the idea is that you can obviously recognize that there can be like a higher incident of something within a specific race or within any sort of specific any specific construct. But the idea is you have to be able to prove that this is something that's happening because of the biology of those individuals and not the differing circumstances. For example, if blacks consume maybe 6 times more pork than whites do, but we recognize that pork has is associated, higher consumption of pork is associated with something like heart disease, then you'd be able to make the argument at that point that maybe it's the diet of these black people which is causing them to have these higher health issues. Do you think that that's a realistic idea, or do you think that people have controlled for diet in order to maintain or in order to come to the conclusion that without question biology is the cause of these higher incidents of heart disease?
Science points to it's the biology. I think that's just a weak attempt to use the pork as an example. There's no science based on what you just said.
Wait, you don't think that... Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, 1 second. Fanatiq, can you speak a little bit louder?
Sure.
Because some people are having trouble hearing it.
Okay, so you don't believe that... I just got to make sure we're clear here. You don't think that high consumption of pork can have any influence on someone's heart condition?
Of course it does, but I'm simply saying that you're arguing that do African American people, for example, have a higher risk of heart disease because of biology or because of the amount of pork that they're consuming? Okay, I'm simply saying that regardless of that, obviously you eat like shit, you're at risk of heart disease. But biologically, African American people suffer heart disease genetically over, for example, more or so than Caucasians or Asians, for example.
And how do you prove it's genetics and not the environmental conditions such as maybe lethargy, and it's not just pork. It's also like the higher usage of fried foods and fatty foods and trans fats. Like those things have a a worse impact on people's heart. And then furthermore, like maybe lack of access to health care, such that you would be able to take preventative measures so as to prevent something like heart disease or early stages of it from progressing. How can you control for that to ensure that it's not those factors and that it's just the race of the individuals?
Okay, so what I'll do is, you know what, I'll go ahead and play right into what you're saying, and I'll go ahead and counter. Okay, let's just take your initiative, because you know what, yeah, if you eat like shit, you're more likely to get heart disease. And one could argue, and I know what you're arguing, is that because of their social status, they don't eat as well, for example, as perhaps a white person. That's where you're going with this. So I'll go ahead
No,
and
it's
say to
not
you,
just social status.
well, hold
It
on.
could be culture.
What it comes down to is exercise and a moderate good diet will prevent you from heart disease. And
Okay.
I don't understand what else are you trying to sit here and say that black people suffer from heart disease over white people because of their living conditions? That's not a great argument, because it doesn't matter. It's not expensive to eat healthy. It's not expensive to exercise. Okay, from my own experience, I eat the same thing every day. Cost me $50 every 2 weeks. 3 hard-boiled eggs. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and get into my whole diet, but I eat very relatively healthy and I exercise just fine. It doesn't cost me much, and I'm a college student. So there's no argument in regards to social class or status and economics contributing. It's a choice to eat like shit. It's a choice to be fat.
Okay, so then it
Simple as
sounds
that.
like great. So then, if you're willing to concede then that diet does have an influence on heart disease, unless you can prove that whites and blacks have the exact same diets, then the idea that you'd be able to come to the conclusion that the higher incidence of heart disease in the African American community is tied directly to diet. I mean, tied directly to their race. You can't make that argument. Like you understand that, right? Like if you're willing to concede that bad diets contribute to heart diseases, and and there are different outcomes, then you can't necessarily say that it's because of the race and not because of their diets.
Oh, I absolutely can, because there's more African Americans on food stamps than there are any other race. So if they have free food, they don't have to pay to eat healthier or not healthier. It's their choice. They make that choice. So
Right.
okay, I'll jump on your bandwagon and say because I don't believe nobody has the same diet. So that doesn't matter what you just said. So basically, African Americans, it's their own. If you're trying to argue that African Americans are at risk of heart disease because of their diet, then that's 100% their fault, because majority of African Americans compared to any other race are on food stamps. That means that food is free for them, and majority of them get $500, $300 a month, so they can eat for free and have the choice to eat whatever the hell it is they want. It's their choice to buy pork. It's their choice to buy chips. It's their fault. Nobody takes responsibility in this country anymore. Everybody needs a helping hand. Nobody stands up and says, I'm going to take this initiative. I'm going to take care of myself. Majority of people want to be fat losers. Don't be a fat loser. Take some goddamn initiative and be an independent, healthy person.
Okay, sounds
Godspeed.
good. Sounds good. So then you're willing to admit that it's black people's choices and cultural traditions that are probably causing them to have higher incidence of heart disease?
Sure, let's jump on that. That's kind of
Okay,
racist to say, though, on your end.
great. So then good. So if you're willing to concede that, wait,
Whoa,
wait,
whoa! You got to be careful what you say. You can't say it's good to
it's
be a
good,
racist in a chat
good,
full of 80s.
good. So if you're
Everybody type in
good,
good.
good. So
Hashtag
if
good. That's
you're
what he just
good,
said.
so if you're willing to concede, if good, so if you're willing to concede that, then that means now that's a complete departure from your original statement in which you were saying that it was biologically caused. Correct. So which of these
Not
two?
even close. Not even close. I'm just saying that what you're saying is in regards to African American people, because they eat pork, are at risk of heart disease. I'm saying that argument really doesn't matter, because it's anybody's choice to eat whatever they want. It's just the statistics and science shows that African American people are more prone to heart disease. And what I was taught in school is that it's a biological factor. You're more focused on heart disease. We studied a few different things at risk of high risk
Hypertension?
pregnancies, etc. So, but let me ask you a question. I think this is what the chat really wants to know. Are you a supporter of the great Donald J. Trump? I'm not trolling. I'm asking you a serious question. Do you support Donald Trump? And I would like to know why not.
Well, hold on. I'm not going to just move from the
So
topic
let's
that we
finish
asked.
this, and
I'm
then
not.
I would like to shift over to that.
Okay, so like I guess yeah, the end of that would be simply this. If you're going to make the argument that there are higher rates of heart disease associated with like diet, right, and that diet can greatly impact that, then the idea that you're saying that black people have higher coincidence of heart disease, you need to prove that black people don't have diets that are more aligned with something that would cause heart disease in order for you to make a statement that it's biologically caused. Otherwise, instead, what you'll get is just a higher incidence while not looking at the causal relationship between those two things. Clearly, everyone in this chat knows blacks and whites do not eat the exact same diets, or not even close to the same diets. It didn't have to be
I think
exact.
everybody in this chat knows
Clearly,
that
it
not a
doesn't,
single
and it doesn't,
person
and it
eats the
doesn't,
exact
and it doesn't, and it doesn't have to be the exact same diet. Just probably diets that are more consistent within food groups, right? So, in other words, the general level of vegetables eaten, the general level of fried foods eaten, the general levels of bran and other things like that. We have these foods kind of divided into different groups, and we can see the different rates of consumption. Clearly, without a doubt, blacks and Southern people specifically ate significantly more fried foods than their Northern counterparts, than blacks more so than their white counterparts.
That's very racist.
On average,
Be
it's
careful.
not on average. This is just the cultural traditions of these individuals. Secondly, we clearly recognize that as time has gone on, this notion that like the eating healthy is just free and it's like paid for by food stamps is absolutely insane. Everyone recognizes
that's not insane, Chad.
Everyone recognizes the difference
Holy
in
shit,
cost.
it's Joe Biden. Can't come up with a decent sentence.
Everyone recognizes the difference in cost. Everyone recognizes the difference in cost between these two different things, and anyone sees that. Go to your Whole Foods market versus something at Walmart. Like, look at the difference in cost in these things. Any person who actually has to buy groceries in any capacity, and I'm not one of them, knows that these things are not like the same. Like the idea, and even if it was 100% up to their discretion, then you would still have to make the argument that it's their choices that are causing them to have higher heart disease and not biology. Which brings us back to the original point of what critical race theory said. Critical race theory said that there are no biological, that race is not biologically real. And the only thing that he could come up with in this case is to say that like blacks have higher heart disease, which of course you can't say is biologically necessary. You would only be able to make the argument unless you can prove, unless you could prove that this is something that's happening. Then you can control for the other factors that could be contributing to these, be they living conditions, be they living environment, be they diet, so on and so forth, risky behavior, whatever the freak. Then at this case, then just making that argument just sounds absolutely ridiculous. Would you like to go forward to more of the other tenets in critical race theory, because this is clearly not one that you look good on? You got enough?
So 1 second, just so you're both aware. Wait, no, Goldy, 1 second. Just so you're both aware. We do have lots of other people that want to get in, talk to Mr. Fanatiq.
I don't think anybody chat. I think you should appeal to your chat. Chat, does anybody care what anybody else has to say? Because I'm pretty sure nobody cares. Look, we came in here to talk about
Goldie. I care. Okay.
Let's go, chat. Let them know.
Chat can suck my dick unironically. Okay.
We don't care.
And it wouldn't be gay because I'd allow it.
Okay, Goldie. Here I got a good suggestion.
So Fanatiq, whenever you're done with Goldie, just let me know. We can move on to someone.
Well, yeah. Here's what I'm gonna say.
If he kicks me out, he's conceded.
Okay, sure. What I was gonna say is, Goldie, I'm more than willing to have like a very long conversation with you. We can do 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever time you want. Like another time during the week, since there are a bunch of people waiting, it probably wouldn't make sense.
Oh boy, here it comes. He lost the debate. He lost the chat. He's kicking Goldie out.
Okay,
here we go.
Great.
We talked. His entire discussion is on pork, ladies and gentlemen. The MAGA Army stands strong. PM me for MAGA Discord link. Make America great again. God bless and Godspeed. Fanatiq lost, and he's a stone cold loser. Cope and seethe. Cry.
Okay. Well, if you want to talk again some other time, Goldie, I'm always available. Just like hit me up. But there are other people waiting. I just think that'd probably be appropriate. I'm willing to give you as much time as you need. We can have a 3 or 4 hour conversation on or off stream. All right, next person, please.
Yeah, to be clear, Goldie left himself. I was going to give him more time. But
right.
Kind of ran away with his tail between his legs.
Yeah, for sure.
I think Patty wants to go.
Okay.
Patty, I'm going to unmute you in a second. Actually, Patty, you just need a request to speak, then I can unmute you. Unless I find you first on this list. I don't know if Patty's ready. Okay, I'm gonna get in Eric first then. Eric, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening.
Hello. Hey, what's up, Eric? How's it going?
Well,
this is the other guy that had some words for me. Let's go. I'm ready for it.
Do you believe in systematical racism?
Sure, I believe in systemic racism, yes.
Okay, how come do you believe in it? What made you believe in systematic racism?
First off, can you define to me what is systemic racism to you?
Well, to me, systematic racism, my bad, is an unrealistic thing.
Wait, racism in general?
Excuse me?
You said racism is a non-realistic thing?
No, the systematic racism.
Okay, but what does it mean? What is even if it's made up? What does the word mean?
Well, as I know about it, it means like systematic racism is when specific people of color are not allowed to take a specific job just due to their skin color, race.
Wait, okay. Wait, what you just talked about is like maybe hiring discrimination. That's like a specific thing. What is like that's. How can you not believe in something if you don't even know how to define it?
I know, like surely what's it about. I don't know like the full definition, but like, I know what it's about, like the entire thing, but I don't know really how to define it. I do understand it. I do not know how to define it.
Like, you've already do you understand how strange it is to have already adopted a position that you don't think that something makes sense when you don't even know how to define
my first language is not English. My first language is German. Therefore, I do not really know how to elaborate further.
You seem like you're able to communicate pretty well. So
I am able to communicate pretty well, but I do not know fluently. I do not speak in English fluently. Therefore, I do not know how to fully explain the thing.
Okay, well, just go ahead and struggle through it. Trust me, I can make some inferences. Like, go ahead and explain it broadly as much as to the best of your ability. What exactly is systemic racism?
Systematic racism. It's like a theory mostly used by the liberals and BLM, etc., etc. It's like a form that is like embedded through laws and regulations with society or an organization.
Okay, all right. Well, we're struggling.
You're a disgrace to your name. Someone tells me. Okay, thank you.
That's fine. Okay, we're kind of messing up a bit. Like, I'll help you. I'll define what systemic racism is to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you're the one who believes in it, so go on, define it.
I'm gonna do so, but I have to help. You have to understand, for you to have already taken a position that you don't believe in something that you literally have no idea what it is, because you can't express it. It's pretty freaking crazy.
I get it.
Okay, I got it. So you got it, and we got it. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and give this explanation. Systemic racism is typically when you have overt or covert systems that are going to create disparate outcomes, like to different people on race, based on race. And I would say any system, covert or overt, that is going to have these disparate, harmful outcomes, like towards a specific race, in their design and implementation, is probably going to be something we would call systemic racism. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
It does, or it doesn't?
Well, could you repeat the last sentence again?
It's a system that is designed that will have that is overt or covert, that will have disparate, harmful outcomes on specific races in its design or implementation.
Oh, fake news.
Huh?
Yeah, that's fake news. I don't believe in that. That's not real.
Okay, wait,
some people.
Wait, hold on, wait.
Yeah,
before
I did not interrupt you. Why are you interrupting me?
Well, okay. I just want to make sure. Like, I'm not even saying that exists right now. What we're doing right now, it's just describing the word, and I don't feel like you. I don't believe you actually understand the words that I just said. So I do. Okay, good. So if you do, then that's great. So then let's make sure that we're clear here, so that we can move forward in the conversation. Can you please explain back to me what exactly did I explain to you from the definition that I just gave? Please explain to me what that word is in your own words. Like that's something that's in line with the definition that I just gave you. What is systemic racism?
I wouldn't be able to repeat all the words that you've said, but I do get it. So what's the reason?
I don't need the words. I need you to explain it in your own words.
Well, you're just going to use the same argument all over again, like to ask me to define it, even though I'm not the one who believes in it.
I'm not asking you.
Should be the one.
It's not the same argument.
You're telling me.
Eric. This is not the same argument. What this is now, I've taken the time to define it for you, And in order to make sure that the comprehension is clear, I'm asking you to parrot back to me in your own words what I just explained to you. I'm not asking you to define it in your, I'm not asking you what your believed definition is. I'm asking you to parrot back what I just explained to you to be sure that we both understand, or that you understood the definition
I do understand it, trust
good,
me.
then, good, then demonstrate that to me. Good, then demonstrate it. Tell me what I just said in your own words.
I literally can't. I don't know how to define it. I do understand it. I just don't know how to define it.
So you don't know how to parrot back what I just said to you?
Yes, correct.
Okay, if you can't,
my lack of knowledge of English language.
Great. So then, if that's the problem, then unfortunately we're incapable of having this conversation because your lack of understanding of the English language.
We are able to have this conversation. You just keep using the same argument all over again. Like, what's the fucking matter?
Okay, so your lack of understanding of the English language is going to get in the way because if we need to be able to use these phrases and define exactly what it is that we're talking about, but you're saying you can't understand the definition as I explained it to you, and you're saying that you can't even parrot it back because of your limited English, then that means that a big portion of this conversation is going to be lost in translation. Let's just forget all
systematic racism. When you were talking to Goldy, you said that there's no such difference in biological race. You know that there are still Homo erectuses in Africa?
Okay. I don't know what that is exactly. So, yeah. What's that?
Oh, well, Homo erectus is the phase of evolution that comes before Homo sapiens. Currently, the humans are Homo sapiens. So that's the final stage of the evolution by now.
Okay.
Therefore, there are some Homo erectus in Africa, and they're black. I'm not trying to be racist or anything. I'm just saying that races do differ biologically.
Okay, let me ask you this really quick. What does Pangea mean to you?
What does what mean to me?
Pangea. Have you ever heard of that phrase?
Pangea? No, I've never heard of Pangea.
Okay, it's the belief. It's not the belief. It's the fact that at
one point... wait. You mean the thing? You mean the thing about the all continents were like together and shit like that?
Exactly. So let me ask you this really quickly. Do you have any evidence that would suggest that Homo sapiens only existed Homo erectus only existed in the continent of Africa, and that it
No. Homo erectus existed all over the world, but they have evolved into Homo sapiens. But in Africa, some still haven't evolved. That does talk about a lot about the.
Oh, wait. You're saying now there are living Homo erectus in Africa?
Yes.
Do you have any evidence of this whatsoever right now?
I do.
Okay, can you link it to me, please?
All right. Well, let me find the video. It was on YouTube.
Okay.
It wasn't like just a fucking drawings or something. They filmed the man.
I'm so sorry, man. This is really hard for me to even entertain. This seems so beneath me. I can't. Like, this is actually too much. So look here, really quickly. I feel like we gotta kind of move on. I don't know. This is a little bit ridiculous to me. Like the idea becomes, unless you can prove to me, like for specifically, because obviously, even if you were going to make the argument, which I think is really fallacious, that there are like unevolved Africans like on the continent of Africa, despite the fact that the vast majority, right, like we'd say easily 99% of the people in Africa are going to be Homo sapiens. 99%. To point to a few people that supposedly haven't evolved, which I'm not believing even for half of a second, doesn't do anything to dismiss the literal millions and millions, the hundreds of millions of African Americans and just Africans and Black people in general in this country, in the world, excuse me. So then the idea becomes, even if you could point that to me, that does nothing to talk about the fact that Black people in general like are the same as white people, and that we have evolved just the same way as Black people. If you were making that argument, which I'm not really entertaining.
I'm not saying that the Black people did not evolve the same as the white people. I'm saying that there is a biological difference between races, which is true.
Okay, I hear you, man. All right, it was good talking to you. We got another one.
Thank you, Mr. Eric. Yeah, I think Patty is.
Right, so yeah, I won the argument because you just.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Okay, Patty, you there?
Yes.
Hey, Patty, how are you doing?
Oh, hi. I just wanted to say hi and learn a little bit more about you. I personally am a Black conservative, so I was just wanting to learn more about you.
Sure. I consider myself to be pretty conservative too, although I think I'm progressive. As I said in the beginning, I'm a conservative progressive.
So what is a conservative progressive?
Well, I guess I was explaining broadly to him. To Goldy. I don't know how much of that conversation you caught, but it's basically the idea that, like, overall, I would say I have pretty traditional conservative values. I believe, like, very, very much in a strong family unit. I believe very much that, like the idea of like single parenthood and things like that are probably harmful overall to society, and encouraging that in any capacity sounds pretty awful. I think for the most part, I think I'm pretty pro-life. I like the idea of I kind of consider life to be beginning at conception. Although, I would say where my progressive values comes in is that though I hold a lot of these conservative values for myself and how I choose to conduct myself and how I choose to live, I would probably have a big problem prescribing these things to other people, because I feel like the progressive part of me recognizes that even if you have conservative values, the idea of legislating these values onto other people seems pretty harmful overall. And then the most important part I would say is I'm pretty progressive when it comes to policies aimed at offsetting some of the previous negative harm that have been legislated to us that still have lasting impacts today.
Okay, so like, in what ways would you describe? And I kind of missed a little bit because for some reason my sound kind of went out. Can you hear me pretty okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah.
Awesome. So like, in what ways do you describe? And you probably said it. I just happened to not hear it. What ways do you like describe yourself as conservative?
Well, as I said, I'm pretty pro life. I also consider myself
Okay.
like I also believe like very much in like very very strong family units. I think the existence of a man and a woman raising their biological child, I think, is probably like the hallmark of like what a family should be.
Hmm.
Although, like, obviously, again, I don't feel comfortable legislating to other people that they can't raise children, whatever. But I definitely feel like this is probably the most successful, probably the best. I would say, yeah, I'm pretty religious. I think I consider myself to be a biblical literalist. It's something Doobie and I disagree with like 100%.
Oh,
So
you're a Christian?
very much.
Disgusting.
Okay. So I'm a Christian, but I am not a biblical literalist.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
No, I'm sorry, not literalist,
otherwise,
not
like,
literalist. I'm sorry, fundamentalist, biblical fundamentalist. Because obviously, I don't believe like the Earth is 6,000 years old or anything like that. So I would, yeah, a biblical fundamentalist.
For one, the Bible never says that the world is like 6,000 years old,
I agree.
and so like yeah. So I think we would probably, like, in terms of like our politics, in terms of like our personal beliefs, would probably get along. I don't describe myself as a conservative progressive. I think that's actually a very interesting way of describing your like political standpoint where you are. I
Mm.
personally describe myself as a conservative libertarian. I typically vote for libertarians. I voted for both for Republicans and Democrats. In fact, in local races, I voted for Democrats, and in presidential races, like in 2020, I voted for Joe Jorgensen. So yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting way to describe yourself, and I mean interesting in a pretty good way. It's good to see that there are more Black people willing to describe themselves in a little bit more like less rigid ways in terms of like their political identity.
For sure. I think there probably needs to be a lot more nuance, I think, in politics in general. I
Oh
think
yeah.
if you can like wholesale just say I am fully conservative or fully Republican or fully Democrat, I think that there's like so many problems associated with both of them. I think they both like get certain things right. The problem for me is that like the Republican Party, like optically, is one of the worst things that has ever existed, and it seems like they're so regressive on so many different policies that it makes it impossible for me to align with the Republican Party. But I
Yeah.
understand a lot of the conservative values that the Republican Party has, and I'm all about that. But can we just like kind of ditch the racism? And that's where the problem comes in.
You're pretty much 100% spot on. So, and it's unfortunate that a lot of like Republicans aren't really willing to see this, because the reality is that like you are actually, and I'm not going to say representative as if you speak for all Black people, obviously none of us do,
Hmm.
but like you are very much a part of kind of your average Black citizen within the United States.
Sure.
Majority of Black people, they identify as moderates. The
Hmm.
next thing they would identify is actually like conservative, and like one of the last things that Black people identify as in the United States is progressive. So like, ironically, Black people will agree with, for example, like evangelicals quite a few things. But there are some main things that they do kind of stick to like a Democrat Party line on, simply just based on the history for why they vote Democrat and kind of how those beliefs are passed between one person to another. But like so like you actually have really retained a lot of the typical the average Black American ideal, the average Black American culture within the United States in terms of like political identity. So that's pretty cool.
Sure. Yeah. What ends up happening, the thing that's pretty gross about this is that even though we all have this identity, very often, like when it comes to like things like presidential elections, you end up getting situations like Trump versus Joe Biden. And I'm not a fan of Joe Biden at all, and I hate Kamala Harris with my soul. But it doesn't change the fact that it's like, well, if it's up against Trump, like you almost we're voting like the lesser of two evils in certain scenarios. And even if you don't identify as a liberal, it's like, dude, there's literally no way I can endorse 4 more years of Trump. So then in those kind of cases, then we end up stuck in these kind of situations where like there isn't. I really don't feel like we have like an accurate representation. And speak to one more point that you said. I think it's absolutely accurate that for a large amount of Black people in this country, like socially, we're really conservative, like really, really conservative socially. But it's just
we're very religious as well,
for sure. But then it's like you can't the conservative and Republican are not always synonymous, and I think that's where you end up running into those problems. But man, I'd like to talk to you more like sometime. It seemed like we probably have like a bit in common. We could have like genuine conversations.
Oh yeah, like I would love to at some point, because like I'm gonna be listening to this pretty much like as long as you're on. Like at some point, if you are interested in having like that conversation about like biblical beliefs, because you said you were a Christian fundamentalist, which is like I'm really interested in understanding what you mean by Christian fundamentalist. Like I don't know if I'm a Christian fundamentalist. I don't know if I would define myself that way. I define myself as more of like someone who probably leans a little bit towards things like Calvinism, but I'm not a Calvinist. So, but the other thing is that it's very interesting that you mentioned that conservative is not synonymous with Republican, and I think that's something huge that you've mentioned that has really affected political discourse, especially when it comes to understanding what a Black conservative is, or the Black conservative is in general. Because what we have, right, is within conservative mainstream media, we have examples of Blackness, which is things like Candace Owens or Brandon Tatum or Diamond and Silk, and like that other guy that does he pretends he's a fucking comedian and eats fried chicken on camera and shit like that. But like literally what it is, instead of actually being like intellectualism that describes what Black conservatism is, it's really just a fucking minstrel show for boomer white conservatives. Like that's literally what it is. So it's really unfortunate that these people have deeply aligned themselves with a party, particularly the Republican Party, almost like perceivingly no different from how many expect some Hispanics or some Muslims or some or people who are also Black to kind of be like the model progressive. It's really unfortunate that that's the relationship that some of these Black commentators have built up with our white conservative counterparts.
Right, man. First off, there's a few things really quickly, just to run it down, like just a few of those things, right? First off, I think like Candace Owens, like I can't really, while she might be a conservative, I think she's an honest
I don't
to
think
God
she's
grifter.
a conservative. I think she's a grifter.
For sure. Okay, then we're on the same page there, because it's like, dude, she's so articulate and so intelligent. It's so obvious, like when she's making some of the worst arguments of all time, and it's like, oh my God. But then one quick thing, I will like throw this bone. What happens is, like, a lot of times people can be hung on their own merit on the things that they've said and done. But what, like, liberals are so like hungry to take down these voices that they will like end up maybe overreaching and taking things out of context. So it's the case of Candace Owens when she made those statements about like Hitler, where she was like saying whatever, they like stretched what she said about Hitler out of context in order to make a point. She says a billion things that are like attackable, that are terrible. We could attack her on those things. I don't know why we would need to go out of our way to like mischaracterize her words in order to like find something to attack. She does it enough on her own. So I don't know. That's just a thing.
Wow.
Hey, but Patty,
would agree to so much.
I know. Look, send me a friend request or message me on Discord. It's probably the easiest way, so that I'll miss the friend request. Message me on Discord. You can even just do random numbers, and we can talk any other time. Like we can talk about like biblical fundamentalism. I think that's a whole thing. But yeah, we can talk about any of it, whatever you want.
Yeah, for sure. I know other people want to talk to you, but definitely for sure, I'll send you a message right now. It's nice talking to you, Fanatiq.
You too. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
No
Thanks,
problem.
Patty. Talk to you later. Next person we've got coming up is Moid, or I think it's Kari.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just fell asleep from that boring ass conversation.
Yeah, my chat was pretty mad about it too. What's up, man?
It's just like I kind of forgot my question. My brain is fried from like that. Hold up.
From all that intelligence.
What do you think about systemic racism? I'm sorry, we gotta bring it back to the black people.
Okay, yeah, I think systemic racism is real. I think systemic racism, we can see evidence of it, like still existing in society today.
How?
Well, first off, do you believe in systemic racism and its existence in society today?
I don't think it's real, honestly. Like, if you bring, like, what do you define systemic racism as?
That's where
we can settle on the difference in the meaning right here.
Yeah, I did that with the last guy, but he couldn't really comprehend it. I would say...
Yeah, but I'm asking you now.
I got you. So, yeah, of course. And I gave it to him, if you remember. I don't know how much of that conversation you were paying attention to, but I can do so again.
I could barely understand him, so, you know.
Yeah. All right. So simply, systemic racism is a system, be it covert or overt, that's going to cause like disparate outcomes, typically harmful outcomes to a specific race in its design or implementation. Yeah. So I'd say that's what systemic racism is.
Okay, that's your definition of systemic racism. I mean, you believe that that's what's going on in the United States?
Mm-hmm.
How so? Do you think that there's any laws against black people? Because what I see it as, there's no specific laws in the U.S. law or the law book that says specifically something about black people, right? Or against black people.
Okay, so just to be sure, can you repeat that definition back to me in your own words?
I already skipped over it, and I don't really care. So, okay. But we were talking about the black people and like the laws against the black people.
Okay, so do you understand why this is a problem? Because we're about to engage. We're supposed to be embarking on a conversation about systemic racism, and one of the first things that you accurately did, and I think it's a really good thing that you did, is you wanted to make sure that we got a definition, so that as we continue on in the conversation, we're working with the same idea. And after I defined it, you immediately said that you don't know and don't remember and wanted to skip it past it. Do you understand how that would be harmful to a conversation for us to have a conversation about systemic oppression, where you're literally ignoring the definition that's set forth? So every time I'm referencing it and trying to explain it, you don't even understand what I'm getting at when I'm trying to provide you specific examples. I feel like
what you were saying is that in a nation you have a specific set of laws and ruling that's disadvantage to a certain group of people of a certain race. Is that what you were saying?
Sure, that in its design, in its design or implementation, that it's something that's going to be harmful. Maybe I should write it out and send it to you just to make sure that we're working with the same definition. Do you think that might be helpful?
No, it's okay. I think I got the short summary, so
okay,
we can just continue from here.
Okay, so then, like, first off, you understand that even if a system in itself right now isn't systemically racist, but if a system is in itself right now going to be disparately harmful to a specific race because of previous systemic racism, you understand that that would still be like a systemically racist system right now, right?
Can you prove? Yeah, sure. But can you prove me an example of this in the United States as of right now, 2021?
I feel like, let me make sure that you understood the thing that I just said. Can you give me an example, a hypothetical in your own brain of an implementation of something of the idea that I just said to you? Because I feel like you're not listening. I just want to make sure you can prove me wrong.
Bring up a real life scenario.
No, hypothetical. Hypothetical.
Right?
Nope.
I mean, it's really difficult for me to bring up a hypothetical, right? Because I live in Europe and we don't have these past laws with like racism.
No. Hypothetical.
Right? So,
literally make something up in your mind. Just a really loose implementation of it.
I'm not really that creative, bro.
Okay, I don't believe that you're actually listening to the words that I'm saying, because this is the second time now in which I've said something and you've literally not been able to engage with it. It comes in one ear and
it comes in the other. I'm still listening. I'm just not really remembering.
So then if you're not really listening...
my brain cells.
Okay.
You're already fried, like half of them talking to Patty, so...
Okay, so if that's the case, do you understand why it's problematic if I'm trying to establish the foundation so that we can continue the conversation and you keep on tossing the foundation out every single time?
Sure, yeah.
How do I build on a precept if you literally ignore every precept?
I don't really care.
All right, well, that's that. Okay.
Okay, I think he's done.
Of course he is.
Next person, I think, is Avasral. I think this is AK. Whenever you're ready, AK, come yourself.
Yo, mic check, mic check.
Yeah, we hear you.
All right. Well, Fanatiq, here's my dilemma with black conservatives, and you described yourself as one, right? You have a situation where the conservative movement has been dominated by the Republicans, and it's been dominated by Donald Trump, who is a professional grifter, right? So, and this is a human being who's not a conservative, who has a resent for most Americans, in my opinion. My question for you is, what is the future of black conservatism if, for the most part, right, the party is led by, in kind terms, because Doobie said I have to be kind, smooth brains?
So
look, you don't need to be like super nice, right? Just like no bad words, okay? No like racial slurs and shit like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think you do so. Okay, so
yeah, he sounds like a pretty cool guy. I think there's a few things, right? I don't know what I don't think black conservatives are going to disappear. We're going to probably still have the exact same conservative values, but then our voting positions are going to end up being something like a little bit more disparate, right? Because I think that plenty of black people are getting kind of fed up with some of the liberal policies and the way that they're implemented, and some of the inaction by the Liberal Party, so by Democrats in general. So I think what you'll see is that you'll find black people, some start to abandon the Democratic Party, and maybe I don't know, like some people. I think what you'll find is some people will stop voting altogether, and I think that's problematic. I don't know, but I think again, when I'm talking about values and defining myself, I'm more defining my values as a whole as opposed to defining specifically my voting, the way I'm going to vote. Right.
So you would classify yourself. Do you believe in climate change?
Sure, for the most part. I don't know. I haven't really. I
You
don't
believe
let me take that back.
It's
I don't.
man-made.
I don't know. I don't know enough about the climate change. I've really not done any kind of research into it.
You see,
So that's one thing that I really don't want to like say something about, because I don't know. Literally, I've never did the work.
Because this is one of the major problems that I've seen within black conservatives, right? And I saw this with Candace Owens on Joe Rogan, right? Where unfortunately on key issues, right? Because my actual dream is I want black conservatives to actually form their own party, right? Because I think the Republican Party is systematically racist, right? I think the Republican Party has a stronghold on what you can describe as dumb, white, conservative, Southern poor people, right? Who have a very strong hold on policy and thus bring the country back, right? Because they have no success to a very large extent compared to the coastal elites, liberals. But when you're not actually like looking at climate change, right? When essentially you're anti-women, when it comes to not being pro-choice, right? Don't you think that these are alienating positions to what could actually bring in moderate blacks from the Democratic Party?
Well, okay. There's a few things. Thank you, Zovia. For one, I don't think black people should ever like try to move towards establishing their own party, and I think there's plenty of reasons for that. Like, you need coalitions and like strong like unity, where with people being able to like answer or represent your ideas. And if you're in your own party and we only make up less than 13%, I mean the argument is that I always see different stats, 11 to 13% of the population, then the idea that we're going to like establish our own party and have any sort of like political effectiveness is just kind of unfounded and unrealistic. So the one I would never do, I would never go with that. But to the other thing that you were mentioning, it sounded like you were referencing the idea that like there are going to be things within specific parties that are going to be alienating to black people, because like people are not, because like there might be like, yeah, just pieces of information that might be like alienating, or right. The idea is that no individual party for any actual thinking human being is going to like fully encapsulate everything that they want to believe in. There are plenty of Democrats who are like completely anti-religion, right? So for a religious Democrat, it's going to be problematic. Maybe you might agree with like some of the liberals when it comes to economic policy, but completely disagree with them when it comes to maybe some of their social policies, right? Like the thing is, if you're a person that's at where you can say this single party fully encapsulates all of my values, either you're a sheep or you're just completely uninformed about this and you just accept the authority of whatever that person is, right? Well, I guess which still makes you a sheep. So I don't know. I don't know that the party is the alienation from the Republican Party is going to be any different than the alienation from the Democratic Party. Like, I think both of them have different things that are going to be at odds with, like, maybe some people, some black people.
So you personally wouldn't, you personally don't vote for Donald Trump, correct?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So because here's the thing, and this is my main concern. The Republican Party, and again, I've described this problem many times on this server. There is in the southern part of America, right? And this includes black people, but when it comes to the Republican Party, it's mainly whites, right? They're in the southern part of America. There are white people who've been left behind economically, right? And in some cases to their fault, but in many cases to no fault of their own, right? They're statistically less educated than the California, New York, Washington, Massachusetts Democrats, the coastal fucking elites, if you want to call them, right? They have less economic prosperity, right? And essentially, they're in many cases desperate, right? So these are people who essentially are the backbone of the Republican Party, right? They're not intellectuals, they're not intelligent, and they have no prosperity, right? In terms of looking to how to make America's economy better, right? Is that a problem for the black community to support this party? Because if these people are not crafting any positive policies, then the black people, in my opinion, either have two options: the Democratic Party, of which actually have intelligent people who run it. In just many cases, I disagree with them because I'm a conservative. Or two, to start their own thing.
Well, for one, like, again, like that, this, it sounds like you have to believe that automatically the Democratic Party is going to, like, immediately do something beneficial for these individuals, right? Like, and I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Like, we see plenty of, like, impoverished black communities, like, that are in, like, democratically run cities, and I think so. Mentioning, like, like, these Republicans in these places are gonna have problems, whatever. Like, it's gonna be, you're gonna run into problems in each side of it, right? Like, and like, I think both of these parties work against us pretty heavily. I think Democrats have done great amounts of harm. I think Bill Clinton was completely trash, like that as a president towards African Americans in particular. I think he's absolutely awful, right? So then, yeah, I could see you wanting to run from Bill Clinton, but then you have people like Trump, who is, like, literally espousing all of this hateful rhetoric and saying all of this complete nonsense, like, that is, like, emboldening all of these white nationalist organizations and all of these dog whistles and things like that. So yeah, you're kind of in you're in a rock and a hard place. And I think what you're describing is, like, the political impossibility of being black in this country and feeling motivated to vote, which is why we see that there's a lot of black people who just decide not to vote, because either way it feels like you're voting for your enemy.
Yeah.
And so it sucks. But
I think are because I'm guessing, like, I'm an independent, right? I'm a conservative, right? We actually agree on many things. I'm a progressive. Like, I believe in a woman's right to choose. I'm pro woman, right? I believe in anthropomorphic climate change, like the rest of, like, 100% of the climate scientists. So I'm pro science, right? And I don't think the election was stolen. I don't think that the climate change is fake. I mean, COVID is fake, and I don't think the moon is made out of cheese, right? So I'm not like the QAnon conservatives, right? But the idea here is, I just posted this in Voicings, right? So this is the actual divide that I'm talking about, right? So you have 70% of America's economy, 70% of America's GDP, right, went to Joe Biden counties, right? So the 29%, right? These are predominantly poor white communities, right? These people are not representative of the black community, right? So even though in many cases I view it as, like, a tough situation, because African Americans, as both of us, I don't think we're represented in any of the parties, right? I don't think that this is the Republican Party is the party for African Americans. I think there actually needs to be someone like a Candace Owens, even though she's not a real conservative, or like a Thomas Sowell, or whoever, who decides to say, you know what, we're not just going to make a black party. I'm not talking about a black party. I'm talking about a moderate party that can appeal to African American conservatives like me and you, because the Republican Party, there's no chance. They don't care about black people.
Okay, but there's a few things. Number one, like, the idea that like we would be able to get behind someone like Candace Owens is just not realistic. I mean, I think she's done a considerable amount of harm, being the token black person to speak, and some of the nastiness that she said towards the just the antagonism that she has towards black people, and the things that she's doing as being a freaking mouthpiece for the Republican Party as a black token right there. I think there's no way anybody's going to want to get behind her at that point. I don't know how she would ever, like anyone would ever want to get behind that. I think Thomas Sowell is also like very much Republican. And I think the fact that you could still identify as a Republican person, considering some of the egregious and heinous things that are happening by the hands of the conservative party, I don't know how black people would ever want to rally behind you. Be like, okay, well, look, now you're distancing yourself from the Republican Party, but you've already done all this considerable amount of damage. Yeah, that's not real. I don't think that's a real thing. And then furthermore, again, numerically, we'll never, ever have like the ability to be our own party.
You can deny 270. You can deny 270. Right, and you can be a spoiler, right? So at least, at least you would have a situation where the Congressional Black Caucus, right, or whoever these people might be, these people would have a voice. These people would be swing voters. I've always said in America, right, the only way African Americans can restore power is by playing the system at hand. In America, Ohio, Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all these things, all these states have in common that they're quote unquote purple states, that they're swing states, right? So that's why Donald J. Trump and like Sleepy Joe Biden, the only thing that they do is they go canvassing these states. Unless you're Sleepy Joe Biden, then you stay in your basement, right? But but Obama and all these and the actual candidates who actually did some work, right? They would go there, right? Because the idea here is in America, the swing voters are the most valuable, right? That's the currency of power in America, right? The red voters, the dumb white Republicans in the South, no one cares about them, right? The dumb liberals inside New York and California, no one cares about them, right? They're going to vote one way or another, right? We already know how they're going to vote. But if African Americans can find a way to position themselves as the swing voters, don't you think the country would be a lot different?
Sure. I think maybe a more unified black vote that kind of like demonstrated like in some way. It sounds like this makes it really sounds like what you're basically saying is that black vote should be courted, and that we probably need to show some willingness not to just be like completely devoted to the Democratic Party in order to like encourage them to be more I don't know, in order for them to earn our vote such that we can actually like start leveraging our vote with something, as opposed to just them being able to accept it because they just throw at us because this country throws at us someone who's so abjectly awful like Donald Trump that we have no choice but to go to the Democratic Party. I think I could agree with that statement, and I think maybe what Ice Cube was doing when it came to the contract with Black America, I think that was something that I thought was really powerful, and I completely stood behind him in that sense. Like he immediately did go to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party told him to wait until after the election, which I thought was disgusting, and so he went to the Republican Party. Now, did that get him the results that he wanted? Absolutely not. Did he ever endorse Donald Trump? Absolutely not, and I thank him for that. Did he ever did Donald Trump actually implement it into his First Step Act, or not First Step? It was something.
Absolutely not.
He didn't. So, but the fact of the matter is, I think that willingness, that ability to be able to say, "Hey, we're not. You can't take our vote for granted." I think that's a powerful thing. So I guess we can end it on that. I think I totally agree with you that yes, like the idea that we should probably be able to force them in order, or make them recognize that our vote needs to be courted.
Can I ask you one more question before I dip out? Actually,
sure. What's up?
Because this was actually a point of contention that we had. Because I'm pro woman, right? So I actually believe in like women's rights are human rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I'm pro-choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
You said earlier that essentially you weren't pro woman and that you were pro life. How do you hold this position, knowing that there are hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of Black women, right, inside America, right, who are going to be affected by not having the right to choose what to do with their bodies and being forced to have a family before they choose they want one?
Okay, first off, I never ever said I'm not pro-woman. Second, I completely reject the idea that in order to be pro-life means that you're anti-woman or not pro-woman. I think both of those statements are. I just disagree with that framing automatically. Lastly, I would say that I think there's going to be some harm either way, right? Like, and it depends, I guess, really on kind of basically where your values are about, like when the life begins. And while I think we can say the cheeky thing, life begins at conception. Like I do think there are different developmental stages in which life becomes a little bit more lifelike. And I think for me, the idea that we would be killing a life is something that I think is problematic. I value that. However, as I also already stated, I don't feel comfortable, I wouldn't, at least not now, I don't feel comfortable legislating something that says basically a person can't get an abortion because, again, I don't very much like the idea of me having an influence on what someone else can do.
So you're pro-choice. You're against the Texas law. You're against
yes. Yeah.
restrictions on women's rights to choose.
Well, for the most part, I think it's the thing is that there is this like almost like there's a conflict within me, an internal conflict, right? Where it's like I do believe that this thing is like I think abortion is evil. I think it's something that shouldn't be done. While I feel that way, again, I feel uncomfortable telling other people what they can and can't do. So it's like there's this conflict because it's like basically I either am pro-choice, which says I'm all for wholesale like murdering or killing of all of these babies, which seems to be specifically black, and it's hard for me to divorce something like abortion from like the negative eugenics aimed directly at African Americans. So it's hard for me to distance myself from that. But at the same time, again, I really do like allowing people to have their freedom. So there's an inner conflict there. So I think probably if like, you know, what's the word? If you hold me to the fire, I'm probably going to end up saying, yeah, pro-choice, because I don't like the idea, whatever. But that isn't without a great deal of internal conflict and the idea that it's something that is harmful for society and something I would never, ever personally encourage.
Look, no one wants to see little like fetuses get their rims lipped off. But like, frankly, if it's either that or like be anti-women and like be essentially like against their rights, then like we have to be pro-women and pro-women's rights. They're human fucking rights, right? I see people inside the chat, and I know these people are essentially anti-women because there is a very large population inside America who are anti-women, right, and anti-abortion, and essentially anti-women's right to choose. I understand this. The reality is these people, right, should not be part of like the Black conservative coalition, right? These people are not going to be appealing to African American women who essentially want the right to do with what with their own body. And like to reiterate, the premise here is if you are pro-slavery, right, you can't thus say I'm pro-black. If you're pro-segregation, I reject the premise that you can also be pro-black. So when I'm saying that I'm pro-woman and people who are against their fundamental rights are anti-women, it's essentially the same. It's analogous. That's what I meant. And that's why I don't think you can reject the premise, because if you are not for a group of people to have basic rights over their bodily autonomy, then you are not pro that group of people.
Yeah, so I think that's such a reductive way of looking at it, because it's not just about whether someone has basic rights over their bodily autonomy. You'd be also recognizing, I guess, in my position, that the rights of the baby, like that the baby is a life, right? Like we already have laws that specifically say in certain states, in certain jurisdictions, that if somebody harms a baby, that it is harmful. You can charge them for harm. I'm sorry, harms a pregnant woman. You can harm them for attempted murder on the woman and attempted murder of an unborn child, right? Or assault on a woman and a separate charge of assault on an unborn child. So I think that automatically establishes the idea that the child that's inside of that woman's stomach, that already establishes that within the child that's within that woman's stomach has some sort of rights such that we feel that we have legal jurisdiction to protect it. If we feel that way, then the notion that we would then say that if this thing has rights that we have legal jurisdiction to protect it, then I can see someone making the argument that logically then we should be able to even protect it from the mother if it has a right to life, such that we would punish someone else for harming it. But again, I get the difference between the idea of someone else making that decision and a parent making that decision and things like that. And again, it is a very conflicted, arbitrary thing. I understand that. But again, I do 100% stand by my total rejection, unequivocal rejection of the notion that to be pro-life would be anti-woman, because I don't think it's just about the woman's body. I think it's also about the life of the child.
That would be anti-woman. By the way, is the fetus a citizen? Like what's the fetus? Like if like say because I know a lot of people in the chat are anti-Mexican as well, right? Like Donald Trump. Say like or anti-Muslim. Say a Muslim, right, or a Mexican person walks across the border, right? They're pregnant, 9 months, right? Is the baby inside their stomach or womb? Are they Americans? Are they people? Like, because it seems to me, right, that if this person is roaming on American soil via their mother, shouldn't we be giving everybody who steps on this great American land citizenship when they're in the womb?
No, God, I feel like this is such a bad argument. Basically, I think again, there's going to be automatic, arbitrary things about this, right? Like we already recognize it. Like even if if two American parents like are in Mexico when they give birth, then that kid is still considered American, right? Because like whatever. But then we also recognize that if there are two Mexican parents and they give birth to their baby in United States soil, then that baby is American, right? So like again, like
So why do you draw the line at birth? That makes no sense.
No, I didn't just draw the line at birth because I just literally just gave you the example of like a baby obtaining American citizenship despite having never been on American soil. So in that case, and it's not simply the line isn't drawn at birth. The line is obviously arbitrary and somewhat contradictory at certain points, right? So in this case, like there's two different things that we determine that we use to determine like the citizenship of a child. One, the citizenship of its parents, and two, where it's born. Like those two things are like we have naturalized citizenship, whatever. My point being, there are multiple factors that we use to determine citizenship.
Well, my question is why? So think about it. The baby's in the womb for 9 months, right? So one baby, right? So one mother gets caught, thrown across the border. She's back in Mexico. And the baby's born. 15 minutes there. Now he's Mexican, right?
Wait, what?
15
what
minutes earlier.
I'm sorry. Wait. Walk me through that again. I got lost. Start again.
A Mexican lady, right, walks across the border 9 months old, right?
Into the United States?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we catch her. We threw her across the border. She has her baby. The baby's Mexican. Yeah.
Sure.
Right. But think about it. If the baby was born in America, then he's an American, right? So my question is, we've clearly, at least in our legal structure, right, said that personhood, right, that we start personhood at birth, right? That's how we start shit, right? That's how we attribute social insurance numbers. That's how we give away
That's not when we. That's not when we start.
That's how we started within our legal system.
That's not how we start
So
personhood.
what? Okay,
That's
okay,
specifically how we.
okay.
That's
Other-
speci- that's
okay,
that's
hold up.
specific.
Then
That's
let me ask you a
specifically.
question.
That's specifically how we start citizenship, right? Like that's something, a specific thing, that's citizenship that we determine if a child, whatever. But as I already explained to you, which it sounds like maybe you didn't agree with, so I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that we go through this clearly. Do you understand the fact that if two American citizens go to Mexico and their baby is born in Mexico, that baby is still born a U.S. citizen?
Yeah, they're naturalized citizens.
Great. So then that means that citizenship is determined not only by where the kid is born, but also it can also be specifically the citizenship of the parents. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the baby needs to be born, though.
Well, sure. Right. For the purpose of citizenship, then clearly the baby needs to be born. But clearly we have legal jurisprudence that specifically says that harming to a baby is a punishable offense even while it's still inside of a woman's stomach in specific jurisdictions. So then that means that we still recognize that the baby is something worthy of rights even inside of the stomach of its mother in some cases. Correct?
I wouldn't go that far. I would classify it as this: if your mom, right, has decided to go to term with this pregnancy, right, then she is the person who is allowing this parasite to live off of her, right? So we've decided to give the mother additional rights, considering that she is carrying a parasite, right? That I'm okay with this, right? What I'm not okay with is essentially giving additional rights to fetuses, or inside the Texas case, right, not even fetuses, embryos, right? Like these have any value beyond essentially the mother who's holding it. It's the mother who decides what the value is, right? And we've decided that we will protect the mother's valuable possession in whether it be in an embryo or a fetus or a parasite, whatever you want to fucking call it. We've decided to do that.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think this is kind of ridiculous. When we start calling babies parasites and things like that, it just sounds freaking crazy to me. But I don't know.
We're not calling babies. We're calling embryos or fetuses. Yeah.
Sure. At what point does it become a baby? Only when it exits the vaginal canal?
Yeah.
So a woman is in delivery, like a fully developed child at this point, but it hasn't taken its first breath. It hasn't exited the vaginal canal, but it's inside of her stomach, and she's in labor. That thing inside of her stomach isn't a baby?
It's a fetus.
Okay. All right. Well, we're done talking. I appreciate you for talking, man. It was a good conversation. For
Like
the most
that's
part.
the scientific definition. Yeah.
Okay.
Crazy. Science has definitions.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. Good
Thank
thing,
you,
man.
okay.
Good to
Thank you. I
talk, man.
appreciate it.
Yeah, see you later. Okay, next person. I accidentally disconnected myself from the program. Okay, next person is going to be Red Roman. He's been asking to talk for a while. Red, whenever you're ready.
What's up, Red Roman?
Oh, hello, is this microphone working?
Yeah.
Marvelous. Sorry, I'm in the middle of making a latte, so I'm in a bit of a fluster. When I first joined, it felt rather more of a left-right debate, though the last couple of chats, other than that one, have been slightly more collegial. So before, I had been sort of working on the assumption that you were of a more left-wing persuasion, that sort of fellowhood support, CRT. Mm-hmm. Actually, you're somewhat closer to my position than I'd thought, because I'm a British conservative, and progressivism is somewhat built into that innately.
Yep, for sure.
I know sort of where you stand in relation to conserving sort of the American Constitution and government in its sort of strain of growth, or basically, do you want to conserve the American soul as it is and then change it to incorporate Black persons, or in a slightly more traditional sort of Black nationalist way, break the whole system down and rebuild it so that Black people won't be working in a system that was, as far as they're concerned, fundamentally designed to keep them down and oppress them?
So it's really crazy because I think too many of those statements are way, way, way too broad, and like a lot of your terminology are things that I don't even know exactly what you mean by that. For instance, I don't know what exactly you mean by the American soul. I don't know what that is exactly, because it's going to be very, very different for like Black Americans versus white Americans, and it depends on which time period you're looking at, or it depends on even how you're defining the word soul, American soul in that context. I don't understand. So you got to get a lot more specific than that.
Yes, right. I was being purposefully broad there, by which it means if one considers a country in its growth to be like that of a sort of a piece of string, that it starts at a position, for example, America, with the founding fathers writing the Constitution, and it evolves and progresses into the society that it is today, do you basically want, as some Black nationalists do, want to cut off that growth and build a totally different system, one that is designed from the ground up, so as to ensure that Black people are included from day dot? Or as a more conservative person, say, we need to guide the country as it is. We're not trying to break the system down. We're simply trying to include ourselves in it. And that a system that was born out of racism will not necessarily be racist. Or of the opinion that white supremacy is rather a sort of insidious beast, that once it gets its claws into something, can't be removed without breaking the whole thing down.
Oh, for me, I don't believe in like just 100% tearing the entire system down and rebuilding it from the ground up. I think that's pretty ridiculous. I think America is the best country in the world. We have some of the obvious best economic output. We have literally some of the largest contributions in medical and biotechnical advances. Clearly, this system, capitalism in general, is incredibly productive. But there are holes and lapses that need to be fixed with like different socialist programs. But with all that being said, no, I don't believe we should just completely get rid of this absolutely glorious system for its productivity. But what I would say is that there are obvious problems that have existed from the inception until now. Some of them literally compound issues, but whatever they are, I believe like that the idea should be that we should work towards like rebuilding the system and or modifying the system and like trying to erect new systems, as we recognize like the later we get into capitalism, the more problems and like some of the other problems that might arise, we should recognize like some of the integration, right? Like that these things brings on different issues and like different times and different technologies bring on different issues, and so we're going to constantly be redefining, rescoping, reimagining new things in order to like deal with the current and evolving problems that are going to be in this country. It's a system, and all systems that are man-made will always run into problems without question. Men are not perfect, and we can't design perfect systems. So with that being said, we need to probably constantly keep evolving new things and redefining and redesigning systems in order to
so I see what you mean, and that is the fundamentally more conservative outpoint as far as I'm concerned as a British Tory. And now I was slightly wary about talking to you about the subject because obviously I'm not Black, I'm not American, and I'm not particularly well versed in the sort of CRT that you would be experiencing or maybe promoting. But wouldn't you say it's true, at least from my sort of ignoramus point of view, that the critical race theory that is predominantly promoted in American sort of educational establishments is a left-wing sort of tool? It was built by left-wing theorists to describe a left-wing struggle and as a way to break this whole system down, and that doesn't that seem frightfully idiosyncratic with your then view of continuing the United States on thinking actually it is the best country in the world and that it is a good thing we need to roll out more, as opposed to most people who'd say it's an awful racist white supremacist system that will only ever oppress people? Don't you find that maybe you're in a bit of a peculiar crowd?
No, not really. So first off, I don't believe that like critical race theory, I'm not sure that it was designed specifically by like a left wing whatever. And furthermore, I don't think that like critical race theory has been taught in most schools. There aren't like really official curriculum in the vast majority of classrooms regarding critical race theory in any way. It's existed for like literally at this point around 50 years. We've already seen like it really is just about analyzing like the way things are historically. It's not about breaking down any sort of system. That's never been the goal of critical race theory. It's literally an analytical tool. And so I don't think that the way you're framing critical race theory is accurate.
I don't think I was slightly, as I said, wary on speaking too much on the specifics of it, because I think it is a beast that is different in its different countries, and therefore I will make statements about it that you won't feel as accurate. But I would object that it's just a tool to analyze. It's to analyze for a purpose, to stop racism, to stop white supremacy, and that from what I hear, and when I said American education establishments, I didn't mean it was a universal thing, but that which on average is taught in an American university or college or maybe even high school would broadly be of the opinion that it is about saying, okay, how do these races interact? How do they intersect with other such things as gender, sexual identity, all that kind of stuff? Then how can we stop it? So we find out why white people have all this power, how they've had power before, and then they don't just go, well, that's it, boys, we've sorted up it. We can go home for tea and coffee. They say, nope, and now we'll see how we can stop that. That's how we have black-only spaces.
That's not at all what critical race theory attempts to do. It doesn't attempt to. So just to be sure, like it doesn't attempt to then move on to the next idea, like what prescriptions can we make for what we should be doing with this thing. Most of the time, it's the goal of critical race theory. The goal is to educate and understand how race interacts with these things. That's it. How race interacts with our law, how race is a fabric of society, and how racism is like more like it's a product sometimes of some of the designs and implementations of specific systems, and we need to understand that. And it's about enlightenment and understanding, because and maybe you can say that maybe some people like think that by educating people that maybe we'll be able to help stamp out the scourge of racism. That's possible, right? But that's not what critical race theory is supposed to be doing. Maybe there are actors who would like to use it and implement it in a way so as to like arm people prescriptively for how they should handle it, but that's not the goal of what critical race theory is. That would be the tool, that the way that an individual is choosing to use the tool. That's not the tool itself.
I agree with you insofar as one can sort of have a lesson on critical race theory, or perhaps even wish to study it without necessarily getting onto that sort of final decision point of, this is how we then break down the whole evil capitalist blah 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 system. But I'd say from what I do know of it, that does seem rather disingenuous. It does pretty much seem as the battering ram to break down the door and the system. And yes, the battering ram in and of itself won't necessarily do that, but that it is perhaps a little unfair, I'd say, to say these two things are totally separate. And why do you? Okay. Oh, sorry. No, please.
I just feel like you're saying, saying, okay, maybe it's not going to be doing that, but it is going to be doing that, and like saying it in like this really broad and sneaky way, right? And I think we got to stop right there. Like I got to make sure that point, like that was the initial point I made, and if you're going to say like not that but that, then I need to stop you there, right? And so again, it's not a battering ram necessarily. I would say that more often what it would be Martin Luther's writings on the wall, right? Like the information is the information. What people choose to do with that information is one thing, but like just simply saying that the information is something meant to tear down the system, I think is inaccurate. It's information, wholesale, full stop. Information. That's what critical race theory is. It's an analytical tool meant to interpret, or meant for us to use to examine historical fabrics of this country. That's that.
Okay. Well, we have therefore just come to a point of disagreement. I really don't think it is fair to say that it is that, and it doesn't have this sort of baggage or connections, or wouldn't, if rolled out, lead to that sort of thing going on, by which I mean a more active attempt. Sorry, my microphone's going a bit of reverb. I hope that hasn't mean I've disconnected. That basically I think it's going to cause a lot more trouble than it's worth. But how do you feel that that fits into your idea? So are you of the opinion that we need to keep America moving forward and in being more inclusive, but we've got to understand how all these racial dynamics have worked, get them all back up to the surface, everyone's on the same page, and therefore we can just move forward and forget about it, or say, okay, we then need to put actual tangible policies into effect of saying, well, now you've got to promote this group as opposed to that group.
Man, you say so much, and like it's hard because I want to like jump in all the time, but I'm trying to be as consistent as I can, like, or be as fair as I can. First off, like, no, I don't think that this thing is going to cause more problems than it's worth. Secondly, I do think that we can easily divorce it from like prescriptive claims, because we obviously already recognize that critical race theory is taught in law school. It's been taught for 50 years, and you can't show me any demonstrable prescriptions that are coming from critical race theory over the years. It's an analytical tool. Now, individuals can make the decision that they want to advocate in different ways, but that's not critical race theory. That's an individual making a decision to advocate. But guess what? People can make decisions to advocate in absence of critical race theory. There are plenty of people who have never been to law school where critical race theory was taught and still are advocates and politically activated. So again, critical race theory, full stop, 100%, is not a battering ram, or it is not any prescription. It is an analytical tool. Fact. We have 50 years of implementation of that, and if you disagree with that fact, then I need you to show me some sort of evidence that belies that fact. Because as it stands now, historically, it has not been some sort of prescription. It has always been an analytical tool. We have literal words from the actual creators about what it is and how it acts and exactly what the purpose for it is. And so like you trying to say, well, I just disagree with you. You're not just disagreeing with me. You're disagreeing with like literally its previous implementation and all of those things. So that was the first thing you said. And then you went on to say a bunch of other things, but I got really lost on that thing. So can you go back to what you were talking about? Or the other things that you said that I probably didn't address just now?
I think we are more talking cross purposes here than I'd originally thought. I did say, I hope to be rather clear on the fact that and I'm sitting on my telephone right now downstairs in one of our little kitchens. And so my ability to draw up exact history of it, I know I won't be able to do that. I shall be rather unfortunately let you down in that respect. But
okay, then maybe
it's perhaps one of those things. I mean, and I don't think it is fair to say it's a ridiculous claim to say a CRT is anything other than simply an unbiased, unpartisan, totally clean tool, and then one can use it as they wish. I just don't think that's fair. I think we have to use such a broad factor.
I never said anything about it being unbiased necessarily. I think it's almost impossible to avoid bias, especially when you're talking about like things like a racial matter. Number one, I never said any of those things. All I did is say that it's a tool, that it's not a prescription. That's it. But I agree with you. You're right. Right now, like this thing happened like on the spur of the moment. If you'd like, I'm more than willing to have a conversation with you specifically on CRT where we can both prepare. You have all the time in the world. The internet is like right here. We're in the middle of a freaking pandemic. You can Google as much as you want to about the history of like critical race theory, and we can see how it's been implemented across all of these law schools around the country for the last 50 years. We can take direct quotes about the intentionality and how this thing has been applied from the actual people who created it, and then we can come back and see which one of us is correct here. I'm more than willing to entertain that conversation with you any day that you choose.
Yes, we certainly could, but I shall be just jolly clear and say I have unfortunately other things to do. That sounds, of course, such splendid fun to be in your company in that respect. And it was also an issue that isn't particularly close to my heart. It's not affected my life personally or particularly intimately. I was perhaps more interested about what I thought would be, and I still do think in truth, the somewhat idiosyncratic position of being a more conservative person in that sort of sphere, though clearly we're just speaking slightly cross purposes about what this movement is and what this tool, how that tool fits into that broader movement.
I don't think it's particularly idiosyncratic. I think you have plenty of people who would easily fall within the guise of recognizing some of the benefits of critical race theory while also recognizing that they themselves are conservative. I think, like I said, the average African American in this country is pretty socially conservative. But I think even though that's true, I think that the average black person in this country also recognizes that race is a mitigating factor in success in this country. So, or militating factor, right? Like for social and economic prosperity. So I think if that's the case, then I think the idea then that like that again, I don't think that's like idiosyncratic. I think this is just like human beings are incredibly broad, and there's like so many different people that are going to fall in different areas of the spectrum.
Of course, there are.
I feel like that belies the idea of it being some sort of specific idiosyncratic position, right?
No. It's simply that I certainly think of, and when I use the term critical race theory, perhaps I'm being slightly more specific in a policy that would, and then I think perhaps can we just move on to something a little bit more substantive in proper policy that I can have a more educated opinion on, and instead of us just going around in circles of saying I think this thing's that, no, you think it's that. So what institutions and policies do you think that the federal government could actually implement that really would ease racial tension and build racial harmony?
Well, it depends on like on what subject, right? Like, I mean, obviously that's just such a broad thing. Like, I mean, the government like has controlling over schooling, over like financing, over housing. And, like, there's
and
so
I want
many
to know
different
what
things.
the ones close to your heart are. Do you think the military could be this great tool for racial harmony? Do you think that actually forcing people to interact more, so like a scout system where you demand that a white Alabama and whatever,
I would say probably like a really good thing the country could probably implement that would ease a lot of the racial tensions and other problems that have happened would be something like reparations. I think reparations would be incredibly beneficial because I think an object that's in motion remains in motion unless opposed by an equal and opposing force, right? And so if we are like we see that some of the racial racist laws that have been created in this country have set some people on a path that where we can see there's all sorts of great harms that are happening, then the idea would be that we should probably use reparations as a tool to sort of offset that trajectory so that people can actually get to a place of equal opportunity. Because a neutral law placed, right, like a neutral law placed in a situation where you have people already on different trajectories, it's going to create disparate outcomes. And so if the law created these different trajectories, then to just say, okay, fine, we'll be neutral now, I feel like is almost dismissive of the problem that the law created.
I actually don't disagree with you that much. And it's perhaps because I did come from a different political context than you. And I think that principle and sort of historical setting basically is true, that if a group is perpetually undermined and oppressed and then the shackles are taken off, you can't just expect him to get up and run a marathon very quickly. You've got to look after it more carefully in that way. But I think the biggest problem with the reparations is that it would cause too much social unrest, basically it would piss off a load of white people who'd feel they haven't got very much, and that would basically cause a bigger problem.
So it sounds
sensible societies need to more perhaps come to terms with their past and then try and build a future together, as opposed to trying to get that more. There's sort of physical actions of taking money out of the wallet of a white person and putting it in the wallet of a black person.
No one's ever recommending that. Please ever don't like refer to reparations that way, because that's not what it was. Guess what? Black people would be paying for reparations too, because it would be coming out of all of our tax dollars, number one. And number two, it sounds like you really just made a really good argument for why we absolutely need something like critical race theory, so that once people are educated and understand how their race has had a direct impact on their prosperity and their options in this country, then we would be able to recognize, like, man, if the country at a federal level was causing these racially disparate outcomes through its racist and harmful policies and practices, then, or at the very least abetting other industries as they were doing racial and harmful practices, then the idea that the country would do something to offset some of the damage that it's done would be so apparent that people would be less likely to be offended. But of course, without this education, when you have literally less than 8% of high school U.S. seniors being able to identify the cause of the Civil War, by the way, was because of slavery. If we have that and we recognize that like the vast majority of people don't accurately understand the historical context around the civil rights movement in the long hot summer of 1967 and so on and so forth, then if we don't recognize these things, then of course the idea of a prescription meant to aid and repair something becomes completely ridiculous. If you don't see a problem, then me telling you I want you to sacrifice or I want to do some sort of measurable harm in order to offset this problem, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
Okay, now so the sort of broad, I mean, of course, you're not in the Congress right now, and you're not writing a bill, but you would say broadly the reparations would be a sort of wide income tax, and that's then spread out to black communities, as opposed to white people paying an extra tax on top. It's everyone pays, and then that goes towards black communities. Is that sort of how it would look?
Well, I guess the direct way that we would do that, but sure. Like in general, it's going to come from tax dollars, and the tax dollars would not be specifically from white people. It would just be from the country as a whole. And would
it actually be a like an overtly reparations tax that the president comes in and says, "Look, we're doing reparations now," or would you want a more subtle, slightly more sort of opaque focus on black communities?
I mean, I guess there's so many different ways.
There's a big difference.
Sure,
but
of
there's
course.
There's a big difference.
I understand that there's a big difference between those things. I was responding to you. Did you think that I didn't understand that? Have I ever missed anything you said thus far? All right, we're good. So really quickly,
you're a very nice fellow.
Okay, good. So then in that case, yeah, I would say that probably it depends. Like I was going to say that Ice Cube made a really big comprehensive. It wasn't him by himself, but there was a really big. He was a singer and political activist. I mean, yeah, that's hip hop was incredibly political back then. Especially when he was like starting like NWA, it was without a doubt political activism.
Oh yes, no, I think I know about that. Yes, I know.
So yeah, so he had a very comprehensive thing where like reparations encompass all of these different things. Like I said, extremely comprehensive. So yes, when it comes to like things like community, like yes, then there might be something about like specifically investing specific portions of like a budget towards like a proportional level of your community. So if blacks make up like 17% of a specific community, then that means that blacks like these 17% of like their financial budget should be going towards like black buildings or black businesses or whatever, so on and so forth. It's really comprehensive, but it's going to change. It's going to vary depending on what the product is and exactly what it is, right? Because again, reparations can come in the form of like sports, they can come in the form of like prison reform, it can come in the form of like business loans, mortgage loans, school funding, military funding, right? If blacks make up a disproportionate level of military funding, then I think the idea is that like we should probably make sure that blacks are being equally represented when it comes towards the funding. We already saw like historically that the GI Bill didn't go to black people, right? Like they historically withheld that from us and so on and so forth. But actually, look, really quickly, Red, it's 4:01,
please.
And I really do I kind of gotta get going. But I just in closing, you will get the last statement really quickly. But I'm just going to say in closing, it really it's kind of crazy to me for you to say that like critical race theory isn't particularly close to your heart. And it seems to me that I'm always engaging in conversations with people that are largely uninformed about these topics, yet already have ideas and descriptions and prescriptions about things that they literally never studied. And then when you ever challenge them to say, hey, like maybe you should read up on this, and then we can have an actual educated conversation. It's like, I don't really care about it. And it's like, well, then how are we having this long of a conversation about something that you literally knew close to nothing about? That's my belief, but you can say whatever you want to.
I think that was a little bit of an unfair mischaracterization and a little out of the collegial spirit that we'd had earlier. And critical race theory, as I was aware of it, and I'm aware of it, and particularly as it hasn't not totally untouched my life. I mean, we're rather engaged in British politics, and therefore one is obviously going to come into contact with universities. And critical race theory, at least in our context, is pretty much a formalization and quite written down element of inclusive, multi-sectional politics. And it is basically saying this country is racist because of all these reasons as to why this sort of racial dynamics, and therefore like it's taught in a seminar so as to lead people on to saying, yes, we need to break this whole system down. It's not quite this sort of very nice innocent sort of, oh, let's just have a look and we can all move forward. I think critical race theory as it actually comes into practice is more insidious than that, though. There was another point I want to go into. Oh, by the way, I'm certain we've all seen all the messages about bringing Goldy back, though I think, as you said, we're leaving now, so that's a jolly big shame. I don't actually disagree with you too much, Fanatiq, and the fact you're a sort of conservative has rather made me feel a little bit, somewhat changes the article of the debate. And I do think that reparations are basically a bad thing. That racial tensions can never be sorted, I think, by direct head-on conflict, and that they are best suited by building a broader narrative that's very inclusive and firm on if sort of conservative principles, say this is who we are, this is why we're good, we need to include people in, and that any form of overt attempt by the president or prime minister to say, look, this group is undernourished, we need to force this sort of development on them is bad. But it's to say, look, these communities are going to get more money for other reasons, for development, and make it basically try and get it. But as soon as race is brought up, it's too much of a dog whistle, I find, for people's ears. But no, it was very nice to speak with you, Fanatiq. I'm jolly aware you've got to go. And so thank you very much for being such a sporting chap.
For sure, man. It's a great conversation. I'm always willing to talk whenever you got time, bro.
Yeah, Fanatiq, I just gotta apologize. I didn't realize this person was British before I let him on.